Hey everybody, welcome back to Burning Hammer Wrestling. My name is Seth. It's been a long night. It is 5:39 in the morning where I am. It's been a long night of wrestling. I've watched a lot of wrestling. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really tired. But I wanted to do this anyway. I wanted to, just kind of give my thoughts on the two shows that I watched. All In felt really long, but let's get into this thing. First of all, there was a trios match. It was the Ops, and I think defending the titles was the right move here. I thought, honestly, it's just one of those matches. It was a good opener. A trios match is a good way to get a lot of people involved on the card, right off the bat. It was taking Samoa Joe out was a big part of the thing to keep him out of the Moxley situation. I thought it was kind of funny that they had this whole like chair wrapped around Samoa Joe's head, and then the commentators are supposed to like present it like it's a serious injury, but like they kind of like moved into a DraftKings ad, and I thought it was kind of weird. It was very pro wrestling, you know what I mean? It was like they're all like basically praying for him to get better, and then they go, tonight's show is brought to you by DraftKings. Use the promo code whatever. It's like, okay, all right, it must not have been that serious. Then we go to the men's casino gauntlet. It starts off with Mark Briscoe and MJF, and it's not bad. It's not really. It's not a bad match overall, this whole thing, but Mystico comes in. He has like a full entrance. He climbs the turnbuckle and he like loses his balance. He jumps off. Then he jumps out to the outside and he takes out everybody. And I honestly, like, I get it. Like, I know we see these spots all the time, but I just hate them. I hate these, like, these diving spots to the outside where for some reason everyone is like, the whole rest of the competitor, everyone in the match is standing outside the ring, just like next to each other for some reason. They're just, hanging out, all looking at this guy that's on the turnbuckle. It's like, I don't know. I've never really been a fan of it because it doesn't ever seem to look devastating, and it just doesn't make any sense from a suspension of disbelief like standpoint. I don't understand. There's certain things you can like explain away, but I think those spots, and you see them in WWE and everywhere, but you see them all the time, and it's just, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of those, but I thought it was kind of funny that he lost his balance, jumps down, and it's like those guys must have been standing out there waiting for him to jump back up onto the top rope. It's like, okay, guys. Mark Briscoe hits a J Driller on Roderick Strong. MJF tosses Briscoe out of the ring, takes the cover there, and MJF wins the number one contendership. I think that's great. I think that's a great move. I'm a huge MJF fan. I think he's awesome. So I think this was really cool. This is a smart move. I honestly think AEW made a lot of smart moves throughout this whole show, and obviously we'll get into that, but the Fatal 4-Way is next. It's for the TNT title. Adam Cole has to come out and he vacates the title. He's makes a speech talking about how he doesn't know, it might be a retirement situation. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully it's not his, last appearance, because I really like Adam Cole. But it was Kyle Fletcher, Sammy Guevara, Dustin Rhodes, and Danny Garcia. And overall, good match. It's another Fatal, it's another way to to get people on the card, you know, and that's always the way it feels, you know, at like WrestleMania or these big pay-per-views or big PLEs or whatever you want to call them. Sometimes, you know, it's just, it feels like some of these matches are just meant to get these people on the card, and that's fine, but it was a decent match. It wasn't anything like crazy. I like Sammy Guevara a lot. I think he's great. Kyle Fletcher's been a big deal. And it was really cool seeing Dustin Rhodes win his first AEW title. You know, that's what that match was about. It was about getting those guys on the card and having him win that title. So yeah, happy for Dustin Rhodes right there. That was cool. Young Bucks versus Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland. This was a good match. I really enjoyed this match. Everything from the entrances, like the pageantry, the Bucks coming in on the boat thing. I mean, dude, just so cool. They're all so good. Everybody in this match is just so good. Just these are some of the guys that are carrying this company right now. Ospreay and Swerve can't get a title shot for a year if they lose. That's the stipulation. And, you know, really, it's kind of a lot of them wanting to do damage to the Bucks so they can't help the Death Riders later on. But this is, you know, they put this stipulation in here to kind of make it interesting. If the Bucks lose, they lose like their EVP status and all this stuff. They kind of have to step down or whatever. But yeah, the match is great, and it's not, you know, there's no surprise there. I mean, you know, look who's in it. There's a spot where, you know, some of these things I don't love, and it's sort of an AEW thing. There's a spot where the Bucks hit these like stereo Canadian destroyers, and it just kind of gets no-sold, and then they both hit back at the same time. And it's like, I don't love those type of spots, just because it's almost like, it's weird, because now it's like you can almost never hit a Canadian destroyer again, because it's not effective, apparently. You know, it's like weird to see those sort of no-sell spots. And I get it. It looks cool. But, you know, on the other hand, as a wrestling fan, you're like, the Canadian Destroyer is supposed to be a pretty devastating move. So, you know, I don't know. That could go either way for some people, you know. Yeah, the Bucks start hitting all their, you know, heel tactics, you know, feet on the ropes during a cover. There's a low blow. You know, I don't know. Ospreay ends up hitting Swerve with a hidden blade on accident, and then Ospreay kicks out of, you know, just about everything that they throw at him. And then Swerve comes in, takes super kicks for Ospreay. While Ospreay's on the ropes. I thought that was really cool. That was a callback to a couple weeks, you know, prior. It was cool seeing him come in and take the bullet like Ospreay had before. And, you know, in AEW fashion, you have the finishers that ensue, and eventually Swerve gets the cover. So it was, I thought the match was good. And, you know, there's things that I can nitpick and kind of cherry pick about these matches, but, you know, ultimately it's like, you can't complain. I mean, the show had a lot of great matches, and you really can't complain about it. Then you got the women's casino gauntlet match, and it wasn't bad either. You know, it was a good way, again, to display a lot of the women's talent on the big stage. You know, I think overall it felt like the implications were big for this division, because I think right now Mercedes Moné and Toni Storm feel head and shoulders above the rest of the division. And I'm not saying like the rest of the division is weak. What I'm saying is they feel like the major stars. And I think having a match that brings out a new number one contender is a good way to kind of push somebody into that sort of, you know, window. I thought it was really cool. I thought Shuri making her debut was cool, and I thought Athena winning the match was smart. because I think she's one that you can kind of push into that spot. Other than that, this is another case of like, you know, like I said, putting people on the card. They want to get people on the card. I think that's why they, you know, they could easily have a pay-per-view like WWE has with the Royal Rumble show, and have the Royal Rumble be the event, you know, the match that is the main attraction. But they don't have to. You know, you do these casino gauntlet things, you do it at All In, that's great. That works fine. You get a bunch of people on the card. It's a fun match. It's interesting. The intervals are kind of whatever. You know, you never know when someone's going to show up, who's going to show up. I thought it was good. Then we have a 3-way AEW Tag Team Championship match. This was it was good. You know what I mean? I didn't mind this match. I think, you know, I've been talking a lot about getting people on the card, but again, you know, it's like it starts to get overwhelming. Like you start to, I think, well, I'll talk about it a little more when it comes to the next match, but you know, it was Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin Hurt Syndicate against Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight. That's Jet Speed, they're called. And then you have Nick Wayne and Christian Cage. I love Speedball. I've always liked Mike Bailey. I mean, dude, everything he does is like, every match he's in is great. So Hurt Syndicate ends up retaining. The match, you know, I didn't think it was bad at all, but I think the main thing was the betrayal after the match, the Nick Wayne thing. And then you have Cope come back, and I hate Cope. I hate saying Cope. It's Edge to me, but you know how it is. He comes back, basically saves Christian's ass, and he says, "Go find yourself." So I think that was interesting. I think that was the main takeaway from that match, just because it was a retain, and it wasn't, the result wasn't crazy. I think it came down to like what happened post match, and that's fine. You know, you can do that. WWE loves to do that, and it does work, and it advances storylines, and it's a sign to me that AEW's is starting to get there with this like storytelling aspect, and they're starting to get to a point where, you know, they're proving that they can do it, and I'll talk about that more as well. But the next match is the AEW Women's World Title. This is Mercedes Moné versus Toni Storm. I was excited for this match. We were talking about it on the podcast. We couldn't wait to see this match. I'm a huge fan of Mercedes Moné, and I know she's like controversial, somewhat polarizing. I don't see it. I mean, I understand why, but I think she's always been good. She's always been good in the ring. I mean, look, all these performers have moments where they're not great. And of course you have, you know, ups and downs throughout your career, but you look at the overall body of work that she's put out, and it's great. You know, there's a reason they strap these titles on her. It's not just, you know, whatever you read on the IWC. These companies know she's good, and they give her the title. You know, it's not, they don't just do it. They're not just doing it for fun. It's not just to build the character, and it partially builds the character, yes, but you know, I think there's a lot of good reasons that they do what they do with Mercedes Moné, and I think it's because she's good. And then you have Toni Storm. She's been the best thing, you know, going for AEW for the last couple of years. So you're going in and you're thinking like, I don't know how they let Mercedes win this thing. You know, I don't think that will happen, but it'll be a fun match. So match starts, it's slow to, you know, sort of medium paced for a little while, and a lot of rest holds, a lot of submissions. And I thought it was refreshing, because you get overwhelmed with, this is what I was alluding to just a minute ago. You kind of get overwhelmed with all these matches that have so many participants, and things seem fast paced when there's a lot of people, because, you know, you can switch out and you can keep the pace high. And then when you come out and you have this singles match, all of a sudden that turns around and things slow down, and I thought that was really refreshing. Some people might think that's boring, but I think it's perfect because you bring out these big names and then you slow the pace down and you make it more methodical. And I felt like it was like one of these things where it's like this whirlwind, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we're settling down, things are coming together, like it just felt like a reset. And I thought that was great. I actually liked the way they structured the whole card top to bottom because of that. It felt like the show was chaotic until that point, and that's fine. It felt, honestly, this pay-per-view felt long. And I know it was actually shorter than a lot of their other pay-per-views, but it felt long. And I think maybe that's partially because I was pausing it, doing things, coming back to it, and taking notes and things like that, which I'm reading. Obviously, that's why I'm looking over here, but I'm reading a lot of my notes that I took throughout the show, and I took a lot of notes. So, it's like, it felt really long to me. I don't think it was over 4.5 hours. I don't even know if it was over 4 hours, but it felt like it was about 6 hours to me. It felt like a long show. And I asked Dave when, afterwards, after it was over, he had seen all of it before I watched all of it. And, I said, it seems like it's a really long show, and he thought it was long too. So I don't know. But AEW, they have a lot of matches on these cards. Of course it's long. But yeah, I thought it was nice to see the pace slow down a little bit. Mercedes was kicking out of things really weak, and I thought that was weird. I didn't know. Yeah, it was kind of hard to tell what was going on there. There was a lot of kickouts where like she just put her arm up and like kind of barely be kicking out of it. There wasn't like a leg kick or like any sort of real kick out. I just thought it was strange. And I don't know if there was some kind of maybe an injury, or if she was just, or maybe it was just intentional. I don't know. Toni Storm hits her with a Storm Zero off the corner, off the turnbuckle, and gets the win. That was cool. I thought it was a good match. I think they could have done more. I think they could have had some more creative spots, but I felt like the build throughout the match was really good, and the ring psychology was good, and it was all there. I thought it was a really good match for where it was on the card. So I can't complain about that. Again, I like both of them. I'm Toni Storm winning. It was pretty much guaranteed that was going to happen. I couldn't see them putting another strap on Mercedes Moné. It'd just be too crazy. I mean, people are already upset enough about how many titles she's carrying right now. And after the Toni Storm thing with the Hollywood ending and all that stuff, you can't take it off of her yet. Then you got the Unified Championship match. This was great. I mean, of course it was. It's Okada and Omega. It's another one where you're like, how can this possibly fail? You go into this match, these guys have a history. They really didn't even have to build this match very much. All they had to do was say, they've had classics. Here's another one, that's really all they needed to do to build this. They did build it a little bit, and I thought it was kind of weird the way they played with his diverticulitis, and like he's coughing up blood, and like it's like, okay, well, that's not really how diverticulitis works, but they continued to play with that throughout the match here. And there was a lot of targeting of the midsection from Kazuchika Okada. It started off with like some early high spots, and then obviously he wanted to target the midsection, and he controlled the match. Okada did for most of it. I thought they did a good job of the storytelling, considering it wasn't, the build was just about Omega's health and their match history. Um, Omega starts taking control eventually. The momentum starts, to sort of shift. There's big signature spots. And after a couple of those, Okada gets the pinfall. And I thought Kenny Omega would win this, but this works too. The crowd, I don't think loved it, but there was a match afterwards, and these guys, who knows, they could have another match. It was good. I enjoyed it. Then the main event, this thing was crazy. Yeah, Texas Death Match, AEW World Title. This build has been great for this. It's culminated. It's really, they've really done a good job building this match. And it's one of the things that I wish AEW was able to do more. But the hype for this match was huge. Hangman Adam Page versus Jon Moxley. It's like I like Moxley, but I've never been like huge on this gimmick. The briefcase, like the idea of the dominant like faction thing, it doesn't seem right for what Moxley does as a character, what he's good at. You know what I mean? I always felt like he was like, he worked better as like the unhinged character that like Dean Ambrose was kind of like that for a little while. Like there was a period where he was kind of like that, and WWE like kind of teased that they were going to go that way, and then they just didn't. They never really, capitalized on that. And I didn't think AEW was able to do that either. I think they kind of, that was the idea, but I think the Death Riders morphed into something different. And I don't think it's quite the character that Moxley is best at. I'm sure he enjoys it. You know what I mean? Maybe he does. I don't know. But he has talked about, in interviews about how he didn't like WWE's creative, and they weren't going to let him do things. So maybe a lot of this is his idea. I don't know, but I always liked Ambrose as the stone cold, like anti-hero, crazy, disregard everything, disregard rules, like, just kind of screw things up type of guy. I thought that was, his best type of character. We talked about Hangman before on the show, but I really like the way he's developed, and it felt like it was like the right time for him to dethrone Moxley after like a 7-month build. It felt right, in Texas. It's a Texas death match. All of it just kind of couldn't make more sense. Hangman's obviously at a disadvantage here with the Death Riders at ringside. And he kind of has to like beat Mox at his own game, because Moxley's kind of this guy that's going to bring out weapons and make things crazy. And, I think the match was just, it started off pretty quick, honestly. Like, there's a fork involved like immediately, and you're like, oh god, this is gonna be wild. So like Moxley's like almost within like the first like 3 or 4 minutes, he's getting stabbed in the head with a fork, and it's like, okay. And then you start to like, as the match goes on, there's like lots of props involved. There was let's see, there's barbed wire, there's the fork, obviously, there's tables, there's chairs, there's broken glass, there's like tables wrapped in barbed wire, or they have like barbed wire sitting on them. There was a ton of different props involved in this gimmick match, and I thought that was crazy. I'm not usually a huge fan of like over the top type of hardcore stuff, and like this was like right in that sweet spot where like it was just over the top enough where it was still like somewhat believable, and the spots looked good. You know what I mean? I didn't think it was too extreme. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. Moxley takes a bump onto the two back-to-back chairs. Dude, that was crazy. That's a wild spot, you know, and Moxley has balls to do that kind of thing. I mean, I sure as hell wouldn't do that. I mean, that is just, I mean, there's nowhere safe to land. You know what I mean? You're kind of hoping that you kind of like land on it at an angle or sort of off to one side so that you fall. You don't want to land directly on it because you just bounce right off of it. I mean, that's a rough spot, especially off of the turnbuckle. I'm pretty sure he came off a turnbuckle, and yeah, dude, it was wild. Hangman actually, so they did a good job with how they were able to explain Hangman keeping the Death Riders at bay. I thought that it was convincing enough. I mean, obviously, if the Death Riders really wanted to, they'd just storm the ring, and because I mean, there's no rules really, so they would have just stormed the ring from the start and beat the shit out of them, right? But I thought they did a good job kind of explaining, making it somewhat reasonable that he would be able to do that. Eventually, like Claudio, there's a spot where like Claudio gets in and it sort of shifts their momentum because Hangman's kind of keeping everybody away. Then Claudio kind of gets the better of him. Then Ospreay comes out to try and like even it up. He takes a pile driver outside the ring, and then another one of those chair spots like Samoa Joe got earlier on in the evening. And then you had like there was like a big suplex off of the apron through the barbed wire table. That was pretty cool. And then meanwhile, like Ospreay's, they're like bringing a stretcher out for Ospreay. Then Hangman's down almost for a 10 count, and he's able to, dude, I mean, that was like, he was really good in this match, like really convincing in this match. I mean, he got up right at the last second and he's like stumbling around, falls against the ropes. Like, it was great. And then he just got annihilated again. It wasn't like he was going to bounce right back after almost being down for 10. So then Claudio takes out the plastic bag thing, you know, they're starting to, you know, play around with possibly that. And then Bryan Danielson shows up, cleans house pretty much. Darby Allin shows up, comes through the rafters. I mean, it's like, you know, it was very reminiscent of WrestleMania 40, where like people are showing up, and you know, it did feel a lot like WrestleMania 40 in that way. And I'm not surprised. You know, I kind of expected it to be that way. Anytime you have a faction that's dominant and has a lot of people, and always wins the numbers game, bloodline, you know, that kind of thing, that's the only way it concludes almost every single time, is by having just sort of an alliance of good guys, of baby faces, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what I expected to happen, and that is what happened. Bryan Danielson showing up is cool. I mean, I know Darby Allin showing up is cool, and I think it works to sort of explain that story. It's really the only explanation. It's like Hangman wouldn't be able to do it on his own. And then he hits a few buckshot lariats, hits a dead eye through the table. Moxley gets saved again because the Young Bucks show up. They take out Adam Page, and then and then Moxley somehow he takes out a bed of nails for some reason, which I don't understand. That's such a wild prop to have. It's kind of cool. And then curb stomps him and hits a paradigm shift like onto the thing. Dude, I thought it was really cool. It's just an interesting prop. Like I've never seen that. I've never seen a bed of nails as a prop before in a wrestling match. Somehow Hangman gets up before 10 again. And then Swerve comes in to help. And then he gives Hangman the chain, which is another, you know, kind of callback thing. And then Hangman hits a buckshot. onto the nail bed, and he hangs Moxley off the ring apron with the chain until he taps. Dude, like, really cool spot to end this thing. I enjoyed the hell out of this match. I don't know what else to say. I mean, and, you know, so Hangman gets the briefcase that Moxley's been carrying for whatever it is, 7 months. And, you know, we had talked about this as well on the show at some point, but like, I didn't know if the belt would be in the briefcase, because what's the point of the briefcase? You know what I mean? So, you know, Hangman's got the briefcase and he opens it up and the belt's in there. So it was just like, he just had the belt in the briefcase for what reason? I don't know. I didn't understand that. I thought that something, I don't know. I thought there would be some kind of twist there, but I guess, I don't know. What do I know? Yeah, that was surprising to me. But look, I thought they did a good job with this show. I really did. I thought it was fantastic, honestly. I think AEW did a good job. They were able to show that, like, they're able to do a good job with like long-term storytelling, which is something that WWE does well, or they have, at least in the past couple of years. And I think it's something that AEW's been missing, is like some of these callbacks and things. And you do get them, but definitely not to the scale that you got them this time. I felt like they really did a good job building this up. And I think another big thing we need to like take a note of is that they successfully like built their own title, the AEW title, by doing what they did with the Death Riders. I know a lot of people didn't like the Death Riders. I didn't, but like, the Death Riders wasn't always good, but this whole story arc has built the AEW title. It's elevated the AEW title. It's made it feel that much more important. And I think it was great. I really do. And I know we've had a lot of times on the show where we've talked bad about AEW. You know, and I'm totally 100%. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think that this show was going to be as good as it is. As we got closer to it, the last like month or so, I started to see it shaping up. But man, they really did a good job. They impressed the hell out of me with this show. And I'll tell you one thing right now is I'll be watching a lot more AEW, because they have my attention right now. And what they need to do is follow up and make sure they continue with this trajectory, because they're making the right moves right now. So we'll see where they go. Man, that was All In. I enjoyed the hell out of the show. I definitely had some negative things to say about it, but overall, you look at that and great show. And it's their big show. It's their sort of finale, like it's their WrestleMania basically. And yeah, great job, AEW. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to do another video here in a second. It'll be up. If you guys are watching this, it's going to be up early Sunday morning. And I'm also going to do a video right after this talking about Saturday night's main event, because I also watched that. So check that out as well if you watch both shows, if you're exhausted just like I am. Thank you for watching, everybody. Check out the podcast, check out the website, all that stuff. We'll see you soon.